Hey, Michael. Thank you so much for spending some time with us to do this podcast. I think the context and Chen-Ming and myself are quite interested to get your opinions and also your ideas about the policy on Construction 2.0 in Hong Kong.
Sure.
Maybe before we start, you could do a quick introduction with yourself.
Sure.
And why this is something close to your heart.
Sure. Thanks, Marcos. Thanks, Ning. Thanks for having me. So, my name is Michael Camerlengo. I'm a partner with KPMG in Hong Kong, originally from Australia, but I've been in Hong Kong for the past 10 years. And I head up the government sector for Asia Pacific for KPMG and sit on our global board as part of that. I also head up the infrastructure sector for China and also sit on KPMG's global board for infrastructure sector. Of course, government and infrastructure highly interrelated. So as part of that, I do a lot of work with government here in Hong Kong around policy, project work as far as infrastructure goes, and also programs. So programs that have a major public impact or benefit, and in particular around the construction sector, which is the topic of today. So looking forward to the discussion.
Hi, Michael. I want to know some of the background about the 2.0, the construction. So can you talk about this part?
Sure. So Construction 2.0 was an idea of government around 5 years ago. And it came about because government recognized there were challenges in the industry that they needed to deal with. And they were things like there was several large-scale construction mega project failures. So things like XRL and Sha Tin to Central Link, they were really, in the media, large cost overruns, time delays, in some cases some fraudulent behavior. So that shook a bit of confidence in the industry. So they realized there were some challenges around governance that needed to be addressed. But there were also other dynamics, such as a really aging workforce. So the average age of the workforce is in the mid-50s. So that meant that, it raised questions about, are the next generation coming through? Where's the next talent coming through? And how to adjust the industry's perception. There are also challenges around safety. So the track record in Hong Kong around safety was pretty poor, when compared to other leading markets. And also there was a general recognition that the industry hadn't innovated much or as quickly as other industries had been innovating. So the use of technology to enhance construction delivery, enhance design, enhance asset management hadn't really accelerated as much as it probably could have. So because of these factors and a few others, government said, okay, we need to do something about it. We need to change the industry. We need to take the industry forward. And so they came up with this idea of Construction 2.0, which was centered around three things and all, targeted around some of those challenges that I mentioned. But there were three topics of focus. So one was what they call professionalization. So lifting standards of professionalism in the industry. Two was revitalization. So this is about bringing talent and new people and new skills and new ideas to the industry. And the third was innovation, which was all about technology, but also creativity. So how do people in the industry be given more freedom to be creative and again, bring new ideas and thoughts to the table.
Oh, thanks, Michael. I know a lot about this. So
maybe as a follow-up question,
Sure.
when being someone who's quite passionate about technology, when I look at the 2.0 policy, I feel that it's still at a very high level. It's kind of a guidance as opposed to mandating and changing the behaviors in there, right? In there. So is this designed on purpose to give them more runway before it comes in harder in the next 5 years? Or what's the context behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea was that it would be a Kickstarter, right? Create an environment where people could, pursue new technologies, pursue innovation. So what's happened in that 5 years since that? I think it was published in 2018. So the last 4+ years since it was published, there's been a stream of new technologies and frameworks that government have issued. So there's been a lot of work done around BIM, right, to get the industry to embrace BIM more actively, including mandating it on certain government projects. So that's been a step forward. To be honest, the industry is still learning how to get the most out of BIM. So it's a journey. There's been a framework called Digital Works Site Supervision. So this is something where construction activities on the site are a framework has been devised that allows data to be captured more effectively through more structured means, and then centrally recorded and captured so that analysis can be conducted on that data. In the past, there was no framework for it. You know, some construction groups would do it, others wouldn't. Government wouldn't know. You know, there'd be no consistency from one project to the next for government as an owner. So the idea of this was to create that consistency and flow of data to allow predictive analytics to assess, you know, is a project failure coming? Is there a risk that's going to be realized? Is a project going to be behind schedule? These sort of questions. So that was a big step forward. That's still evolving, but certainly has moved forward in a big way. And the other big one, and I'm just picking on a few here because there's lots, but the other big one is what they call modular integrated construction. So MIC is what they refer to in Hong Kong. In other markets, they call it DFMA, design for manufacture and assembly. But what that is basically designing a building, an asset, some sort of constructed asset, in BIM or in a design software, and then taking that design to a manufacturing facility where they will build parts of that asset or large parts of that asset. Think of like a floor of a building. They'll build a floor of a building in a factory, right? In southern China maybe, right? And then they will take they will take those floors or that floor and then ship it to the site in Hong Kong, so that it's just basically comes off a truck or off a boat and then put on the site and assembled. You know, a few workers will come and connect the services, the electrics, the plumbing, etc. But basically it's ready to go. So that the benefit of that approach is it reduces the amount of construction on the site, which is always dirty, dusty, exposed to weather, safety issues. So you reduce the manpower required on the site, you make it safe and clean and effective in a manufactured facility, and it can also reduce time and cost. So that's been a really big step forward, and there's more and more of this happening in Hong Kong, and they're mandating more and more of this sort of method of construction, and I think we're going to only see that pick up in the years to come.
Maybe two follow-up questions just on that. I think for our audience in here, they may not know what BIM is. Maybe you could just share a bit about what BIM is.
Sure.
And then, when we looked at policy, public policy is always something we look at is how did they choose BIM and why? Right?
Yes.
Because there's so many different standards and
Yes.
how the Hong Kong government is like BIM is suitable for Hong Kong.
Sure.
That's one. And then I think on the second one in there, when you shared about how you do construction off-site, and just bring in impact. Does this also helps Hong Kong achieve a net carbon zero, right? Because you are doing, let's say, just bringing the finished product in.
Yeah. Does
Does this help us with government strategy of it, right? So maybe a two-part question that's quite different.
No problem. Good questions. So BIM stands for, well, some people say building information modeling, some say building information management. Regardless, it's basically a software, and it's not a brand. So there are lots of different brands out there of BIM types of software, but it's essentially a software used to design a built asset. So it's kind of like the next generation of CAD, AutoCAD, whereby it takes things to the next level, where you can design pretty much every part of a built asset. So right down to nuts and bolts, right? So you'll have detailed electrical designs, plumbing designs, obviously structural engineering, the facade works, foundation planning, all of that can come together in one three-dimensional design that brings lots of different design people in, or capabilities or experts in, to contribute to that overall working design. So it gives a really detailed master design, and it allows for all sorts of analysis. So things that they call, an example is clash analysis. So what that is when you're designing an asset, it can be hard to tell if certain services in the wall are going to clash with each other. So is the plumbing going to clash with the electrics? You know, for example, is that going to cause problems? BIM allows you to see that and then ultimately change the design more effectively.
Is it a global standard? Every across the world, we're all moving to this?
I would say it's a global movement. Yeah. So most major markets are moving towards or on the journey towards embracing BIM. And where people would like it to go in the future is it's not just as a design tool, but an asset, a solution that can be used for the life of an asset. So it runs through that asset's operations. So, for example, it can help determine when certain equipment or facilities need to be replaced or maintained. It can help plug into building management systems that tell you, is there an emergency, is there a fire, is there a safety issue? So it kind of provides that baseline of data that plugs into asset management. But it's not, I would say that we're not fully there yet in terms of an industry, but that's where people would like it to go. So designing at the beginning for, you know, a 20, 30 year life of an asset. So pretty futuristic. Your second part of your question was around
about MIC, which is earlier modular integrated construction.
Yes.
And does this actually help us achieve a net carbon zero? Is this one of the big things in obviously construction is a I wouldn't say polluter, but it's
no, it is. No, construction is one of the biggest contributors to carbon in our industries and communities. So yes, and I think MIC does have a big role to play in helping move towards that net zero target at a few levels, right? So one is by manufacturing something off-site in a more efficient environment, you know, the energy resources that you use to build those assets can be optimized. So you're not, you know, if you compare that with building something on site, you're not relying on diesel generators to pump power for builders to do their bit. So you can actually be far more efficient during construction. And as you can also, if you're smart about it, be more effective in designing those assets so that they use less energy in operations, because a feature of MIC is that because you don't have many chances to fix it, once it's on site, it's there, you know, and so compared with traditional construction, you know, things tend to change a lot more in traditional construction. Once you get on site, you see mistakes and you make changes to the built asset more readily. If you're using a MIC, you tend not to have that opportunity, which means you need to design more carefully at the beginning using BIM and you know, similar solutions. So what it means is more discipline, more thought at the front end, which can also apply to designing something that's going to have less of a carbon footprint. So so the short answer is yes, I think definitely. Yeah.
But I think, you know, maybe also this is the last question in here. When they were thinking about this in 2018, obviously net carbon zero wasn't high in the policy makers in there, but is it a coincidence or just because we are innovating, we're going the right direction? I guess that's a question in there. And then followed by, you know, construction 3.0, right? Like I know you're doing some work about, you know, 2030 and so forth. You know, maybe you can share what would we be looking at and how does the industry, the other policy actors come together to shape this policy, like the future, if you like, construction 3.0.
Yes, yeah, great question. So quick answer to the first one is construction 2.0 has been incredibly successful in Hong Kong. Like the industry has really embraced it, and that's why it continues to be the kind of key theme running through the industry 4 or 5 years after it was published. And I think the beauty of it was its simplicity. It didn't try to answer every question because the market is changing, you know, the community is changing, the economy is changing, technology is changing. So they created a framework that allowed the market to evolve, right? And the classic example is the one you just mentioned, right? Net zero wasn't so high on the agenda back then for anyone, and now it certainly is. And construction 2.0 can support that, right? Because it's about innovating for business needs and community needs. So definitely. On the second question, 2030 or the future, right? Where are we at? So really hard to know. The construction industry is transforming so rapidly. But I think, and I've had discussions with government around this in Hong Kong, and we brainstorm ideas and what the future might look like. And one of the sort of notions that we came up with was, if you compare construction today, a lot of it still happens on site, and a lot of that work is, a lot of the time involved in any project is done, in the field or on the site. So if you think about a hypothetical project, it might take 10 years from initial idea to completion, right? Let's say 2 years of planning, 2 years of design, and 6 years of construction. So that's 60% of that, of that process being done, construction on site. Fast forward to the future, by using BIM, by using MIC, by using other technologies that get developed in the years to come, I think there's the prospect to reduce that time on site down to 20 to 30%, right? Wow. So 2 to 3 years of a 10-year life cycle, right? Because what will happen is people will spend more time designing, getting it right, using technology applications, more time in the manufacturing facility, building these assets to perfection. And as a result, you won't need to spend so much time on the site. And that'll have all sorts of benefits, as I said earlier: time, cost, safety, carbon emissions, you name it. So I think, fast forward 8-10 years, I think that's something that we could possibly be looking at if all goes well. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think maybe, Chilling and I will think of how do we wrap up and close. The audience for this podcast are actually postgraduate students, sure, either doing their master's or their PhDs in public policy.
Yes.
As someone who's in the industry now, what, I guess, advice or key messages would you give to us who are interested doing this, right? What we say to them, so that in the future, when some of us are in government positions or policy makers or influencers, what should we remember from our chat with Michael Camerlengo today?
Great. Wow. Really, really tough question. Well, today's discussion has been about technology, right? So maybe just keeping it within that context. I think technology is always changing, and there's always new ideas that will continue to come through. And I think it's important that we, as a community of people in this space, embrace those ideas and listen to those ideas and accept them. But I think in deciding which ideas to pursue, which solutions to adopt and embrace, it's got to come down to what are the benefits that those technologies are going to deliver. And in a public sector context, government, I always put it down to a few simple factors. Is there an environmental benefit? What we've been talking about today. Is there an economic benefit? Is it going to help create more jobs or create efficiencies in the way projects are delivered and operated? Is there a social benefit? Does that asset help with things like equality, poverty, lifestyle, these sort of dimensions? Is there a social benefit? And the other one would be, is there a financial benefit? So, which kind of comes back to the economic piece as well, but more pure play financial. So cost, is it going to generate more income streams for the public sector to reduce the burden on taxpayers? So these sort of dimensions is how I look at it. So there has to be a benefit. Technology for the sake of technology doesn't make sense. But if it delivers value across those areas, or more than one of those areas, then it looks like it could be something good for the public sector, for industry to pursue. So that's my advice. Hopefully that's useful.
Michael, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Nick.